The girl was born under a bright desert sky, in a small Apache village, surrounded by mountains and wide, dusty plains. Her parents were proud and hopeful when they first saw her tiny, fragile body. But their hope quickly turned into fear and sadness. She had been born without legs. Her small body could not support itself in the way other children's did. Her parents whispered quietly, hiding their worry, unsure how they would raise a child so different from the others in their tight-knit tribe. From the very beginning, the girl faced a world that seemed unkind. The other children ran and played, their laughter filling the air as they chased one another across the open fields. They learned to climb rocks, gather food, and carry water for their families. She watched them with wide eyes, longing to join in, longing to feel the same freedom. But every time she tried to crawl or move with her hands, someone would sigh, shake their head, or turn away. Her body was strong in its own quiet way. But it was not the body that the tribe had expected or valued. Her parents loved her as much as they could, though it was clear they were struggling too. They tried to help her, making small wooden frames and soft cushions for her to sit on. They encouraged her to try moving in any way she could, but their efforts often felt small against the weight of the tribe's unspoken judgment. Every glance from a neighbor or relative seemed heavy with disappointment, as if they were reminding her that she was different in the worst possible way. The girl began to understand, even as a child, that she was not like the others. She noticed how her tribe celebrated strength, speed, and the ability to contribute to hunting and daily survival. She noticed how mothers carried water, fathers built shelters, and young men learned to ride horses and track animals. She could not do these things. No matter how hard she tried, she could not run, climb, or stand like the others. Yet, even in her darkest moments, she had a spark inside her. She was curious about the world. She loved listening to the stories of the elders, tales of courage, of adventure, of people who faced challenges and yet found ways to survive. Though she could not hunt, she learned the names of every plant and herb, every bird that soared above the desert, every animal that ran across the plains. She listened carefully, memorizing their sounds, their movements, and their habits. In her mind, she began to explore a world far larger than her body allowed her to explore physically. As she grew, the whispers became louder. Children avoided her games, calling her names behind their hands, while adults exchanged glances that made her heart ache. The tribe spoke in hushed tones, debating what should be done about her. "She will not survive like the rest," some said. "She cannot help her family. She cannot be part of our future." These words struck her like stones, but she did not let them crush her completely. Instead, they lit a small fire within her, a quiet determination to prove that she had value, even if the tribe could not see it. Her parents, torn between love and fear, tried to teach her practical skills. They showed her how to weave baskets while sitting, how to make small tools, how to gather berries and herbs from the edges of the plains. But they could not shield her from the whispers and the looks of disapproval. She felt the loneliness pressing against her chest like a heavy stone. She wanted to run, to join the others, to feel the sun on her legs as they sprinted across the fields. But her body would not allow it. By the time she reached the age of 10, the tribe's decision had become clear. She was different, too different to belong fully. The elders called a council, and she overheard fragments of the discussion. Words like burden and useless filled the air. Her heart pounded as she realized what was being said about her, as if a shadow had fallen over the small patch of earth she called home. The girl did not cry openly, though tears burned her eyes. She had learned early that showing weakness only invited more judgment. Instead, she focused on what she could control: her mind, her thoughts, her determination to survive. She began to move in new ways, learning to pull herself across the ground with her hands and arms. She discovered that she could climb small rocks and reach for fruit in low-hanging branches. Though it was slow and painful, she refused to give up entirely. She found small joys in her accomplishments. Reaching a berry bush, seeing a bird up close, or finding a quiet place by the river where she could watch the world go by without interference. These small victories became the center of her life. Despite her efforts, the tribe grew more distant. They no longer invited her to gatherings or ceremonies, and even her parents struggled with how to include her in daily life. She learned to eat alone, to sleep in a small corner, and to move silently to avoid drawing attention. The harsh reality of abandonment was settling in. The girl realized that if she wanted to survive, she could not depend on anyone but herself or someone who might appear from outside the tribe's judgmental world. It was during one of her solitary explorations near the edges of the plains that she first noticed the farmer. He was a quiet man who lived alone in a small house surrounded by fields. Unlike the tribe, he did not seem to judge her immediately. He observed her carefully as she struggled to pull herself across the ground. Yet, there was no whisper of uselessness in his eyes. Instead, he simply nodded once, as if acknowledging her existence and her courage. The girl felt something she had not felt in years, a small flicker of hope. Even though she had been abandoned, even though her body had betrayed her in the eyes of her people, she began to dream quietly. She dreamed of a life where she could be useful, where she could matter, where someone could see her for what she could do, rather than what she could not. It was a tiny seed, barely noticeable, but it was there. And she clung to it fiercely, because without it, life would have been almost unbearable. Her nights were long and lonely, but she often imagined herself moving through the world freely. She pictured herself helping others, learning new skills, and perhaps even one day showing her tribe that she was not useless. These thoughts were dangerous in a place where hope could be punished by ridicule or abandonment, but they became her secret strength. With each day, she practiced moving her body, strengthening her arms, and learning new ways to reach things others took for granted. She had discovered the power of patience and determination, and it gave her a quiet confidence that no one in her village could take away. By the time the council's decision became final, the girl was ready in her mind for the harsh truth. Her tribe had decided that she was to be left alone, that she was a burden they could no longer carry. It was a cruel reality, but she faced it with a strange sense of acceptance. She knew that survival would be difficult, but she also knew that giving up would mean letting the tribe's words define her forever. She would survive, not for them, but for herself. And so, with a mixture of fear and determination, the young girl began the next chapter of her life alone, abandoned by those who were supposed to protect her, yet holding on to a quiet flame of hope that perhaps, somewhere, there was someone who could see her value. The world was wide and unforgiving, but she was ready to face it. The girl's first days alone were harder than anything she had ever imagined. The wide plains that had once seemed beautiful and open now felt endless and cold. Without the familiar faces of her tribe, every sound of wind or animal echoed in her mind like a warning. She had survived the whispers and judgment at home, but survival on her own was an entirely different challenge. Every small task, finding water, foraging for food, and keeping herself safe, became a battle against her own limitations and the harshness of the land. She learned quickly that she could not rely on anyone but herself. Each morning, she would wake with the sun casting golden light across the desert, and she would stretch her arms, preparing to pull herself forward. Her hands, once small and delicate, grew strong and calloused from the effort. She used rocks, tree branches, and anything she could find to help her move. Every inch she covered felt like a triumph. Even when her arms ached or her skin was scraped and bruised, she refused to stop. Giving up was not an option. She had learned too early that hope, even the smallest kind, was precious. Food was the greatest challenge. She remembered her parents teaching her about edible plants and berries, but it was not enough. The plains were vast, and food was not always easy to find. She scavenged seeds, small fruits, and roots, often crawling for hours to reach them. She learned which berries were safe to eat, and which would make her sick. She discovered shallow waterholes where small animals came to drink and used them to quench her thirst. At first, it was frightening, moving alone in a world where dangers lurked everywhere. Coyotes prowled at night, snakes slithered silently across the sand, and even a sudden rockslide could have ended her life. Yet, with every day she survived, her confidence grew, and her fear began to lessen. Even in her solitude, she remained curious. She watched the sun rise and set, tracing the patterns of the clouds and birds. She listened to the whispers of the wind through the grass and the low hum of insects across the earth. Every sound, every movement, became a lesson. She learned to recognize the warning calls of birds when a predator was near. She could sense the change in the wind before a storm approached. Her mind became sharp, aware of every detail around her, compensating for the limitations of her body. In a way, she had discovered a secret strength that those who could run and climb might never understand. Nights were the hardest. Darkness brought loneliness and fear. The sky, filled with countless stars, was beautiful but also a reminder of how small and vulnerable she was. She missed the warmth of family and the comforting voices of her parents. She thought of the tribe and wondered if they would ever regret abandoning her. These thoughts hurt deeply, but they also strengthened her resolve. She decided that she would not allow their rejection to define her. She would survive, no matter what. As the days turned into weeks, she developed small routines to make life a little easier. She found a sheltered spot near a cluster of rocks where she could rest safely at night. She collected stones and sticks to make a small tool for reaching high branches or digging for roots. She used her cleverness to fashion a crude seat out of fallen wood so she could sit without exhausting her arms completely. These small inventions became a source of pride, each one a testament to her determination and intelligence. Though she was alone, she was not powerless. Her body, while limited, was still strong in its own way. She discovered muscles she never knew she had, and she learned how to move fluidly with her hands, arms, and torso. Crawling and pulling herself across the plains became almost graceful, and she could cover surprising distances each day. She could reach fruit, gather herbs, and even climb small ledges that seemed impossible at first. Every accomplishment filled her with quiet joy, a sense of achievement that no one could take away. Despite her progress, life remained harsh. Storms would sweep across the plains, drenching her in cold rain and leaving her shivering. She sometimes awoke to find her small shelter collapsed, or the fruit she had collected washed away. Hunger was a constant companion, gnawing at her stomach and reminding her of her vulnerability. And yet, through every trial, she learned resilience. She adapted to each setback, finding new ways to survive, and thinking ahead to prevent future challenges. Her mind became as strong as her body, constantly learning and strategizing. Over time, the girl began to notice that the world, though harsh, had moments of kindness and beauty. She saw a rabbit nibbling on fresh grass and paused to watch it hop freely, wishing she could move like that. She watched hawks soar above, their sharp eyes scanning the earth below. She noticed the way the wind carried scents of flowers and dry soil, and the way the sunlight painted golden patterns across the desert. These small observations brought her joy and reminded her that life could still be beautiful, even in loneliness. One day, while exploring farther than she had before, she found herself near the edge of the farmland where the lonely farmer lived. From a distance, she saw him working with tools, tending to his crops, and moving with calm determination. She watched quietly, curious but cautious. The farmer, unlike her tribe, did not shout or rush. He seemed patient, steady, and gentle with the earth and the plants he cared for. There was something comforting in his presence, a sense that perhaps he would not judge her the way the tribe had. Days passed, and she continued to observe him from afar. She practiced moving closer, testing her abilities, and learning how to navigate new terrain. Each time she approached, she felt a mixture of excitement and fear. She wanted help but did not know if she could trust anyone. Her past had taught her that kindness was rare, and that judgment could be harsh. Yet, something about the farmer's quiet strength drew her in. She imagined what it would be like to have someone acknowledge her, to see her abilities rather than her limitations. The girl's mind often wandered to what life might be like with help. She imagined the farmer showing her how to plant seeds, gather food more easily, or even move around without exhausting herself. She dreamed of laughter, conversation, and the simple comfort of being seen and valued. These dreams gave her energy to continue, to push herself further, and to refuse to let loneliness defeat her spirit. They were small sparks of hope, tiny lights in the darkness that reminded her that life could change. Even in her solitude, she discovered a sense of independence she had never known before. She was learning that survival was not only about physical strength, but about patience, observation, and cleverness. She could plan her days, remember safe paths, and anticipate challenges. She had become a silent observer of the world, learning to move carefully and think ahead. Her mind, once filled with fear and sadness, now held strategies and knowledge that allowed her to navigate the harsh desert with quiet confidence. As weeks turned into months, the girl began to notice subtle changes in herself. Her arms had grown stronger, her movements more fluid, and her understanding of the land deeper. She could find food where others might overlook it, sense danger before it arrived, and endure discomfort that would have overwhelmed her earlier. She realized that being abandoned had forced her to grow in ways the tribe could never have imagined. Though her heart still ached for acceptance, she felt a quiet pride in her resilience. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the desert in shades of orange and pink, the girl sat on a small rock, watching the farmer from a distance. She had learned to observe without fear, to notice details that others might miss, and to take careful steps toward her goals. She felt a sense of anticipation, a subtle excitement she had not felt in years. Perhaps, she thought, help could come from unexpected places. Perhaps someone could see her worth, not as a burden, but as a person capable of great courage and ingenuity. Though the nights were still long and lonely, the girl no longer felt entirely hopeless. She had survived harsh conditions, learned to navigate the world in her own way, and discovered hidden strength within herself. Each day brought new challenges, but also new victories, however small. And in the quiet distance, the presence of the farmer hinted at a future she had never dared to imagine, a future where she might finally find companionship, guidance, and the chance to thrive despite the odds stacked against her. The girl had been observing the farmer for many weeks now. From the safety of her small hiding spots, among the rocks and shrubs, she watched him as he worked quietly in his fields. There was something comforting about his presence. He moved slowly and carefully, never raising his voice, never showing any sign of hurry or impatience. To the girl, who had spent her entire life being judged and abandoned, the farmer seemed like a quiet beacon in a world that often felt harsh and unforgiving. At first, she kept her distance. Her mind told her to be cautious. She had learned the hard way that trusting others could bring disappointment or even danger. But curiosity and hope pulled her forward. Little by little, she began practicing moving closer to the farmhouse each day, testing her strength and endurance. Crawling, pulling herself along the ground, and carefully avoiding sharp rocks and thorny bushes, she learned to approach without being seen. Every small step toward the farmer was a victory, a test of her courage, and a measure of her determination. One afternoon, the girl felt particularly brave. The sun was warm on her back, and the scent of fresh earth and growing plants filled the air. She had managed to move closer than ever before, and the farmer was kneeling by a row of young crops, gently turning the soil with his hands. He looked up briefly, scanning the horizon, and then returned to his work. His eyes, calm and observant, seemed to notice everything around him. For a moment, the girl's heart raced. She wondered if he could see her, or if she was still hidden. She remained perfectly still, barely daring to breathe, until finally, he stood and walked slowly toward the small shed at the edge of the field. It was the first time she felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. Maybe he would not judge her, she thought. Maybe he would see her for who she was, rather than what she lacked. That evening, she returned to her small, sheltered spot, thinking about the possibilities. She imagined the farmer, noticing her struggles, and offering help. She imagined learning to do things she had never done before, to move in ways that seemed impossible. The thought warmed her heart, like sunlight, after a long, cold winter. The next day, she took another brave step. She approached the edge of the farmland again. This time, a little closer. The farmer was there, kneeling near the soil, carefully planting seeds. The girl felt her pulse quicken. She was nervous, but also determined. This time, she wanted to make herself seen, to test whether the farmer's kindness extended beyond mere observation. She called out softly, almost in a whisper, "Excuse me." The farmer looked up immediately. His eyes widened slightly, not in alarm, but in curiosity. He saw her, a small figure struggling to pull herself across the ground, and he paused. There was no judgment in his gaze, no flicker of impatience. Instead, there was something gentle and thoughtful, as if he were trying to understand her. The girl's heart beat faster. She had never experienced a look like this before. In the tribe, people had always turned away, whispered behind her back, or avoided her altogether. Here was someone who simply saw her. The farmer smiled, a small, kind smile, and nodded slightly. "Hello," he said in a calm voice. "Are you all right?" The girl hesitated. She had spent so long being cautious, so long expecting rejection, that hearing kindness felt almost unbelievable. She wanted to nod, to respond, but the words seemed stuck in her throat. Finally, she managed a quiet, I'm okay." The farmer crouched down to her level, careful not to seem threatening. "It looks like you've been moving a long way," he said. "Do you need help?" She froze. Help? She had never been offered help before without strings attached. The tribe had abandoned her, believing she had no value. Could she trust this man? Her mind raced with doubt, but something inside her whispered that he was different. Slowly, she nodded. "Yes, please," she whispered. For the first time in her life, someone reached out to her without judgment. The farmer gently guided her toward a small wooden cart he had built. It was low to the ground and designed to help move heavy things across the field. Carefully, he helped her settle onto it, showing her how to use her arms to pull herself forward, with a little more ease. The girl felt a mix of fear and relief. She was no longer entirely alone. Someone was helping her navigate the world, and it was not frightening, it was comforting. Over the next few days, the girl and the farmer spent more time together. At first, it was awkward. She was cautious, unsure of how much to trust him. He was patient, never pushing her, allowing her to take her time and find her own comfort. He taught her small skills: how to water plants, how to gather herbs, and how to use simple tools with her hands. Each lesson was a small victory. The girl realized that her body might be limited, but her mind and determination could achieve great things with guidance and support. As they worked side by side, a bond began to form. The farmer spoke little, but when he did, his words were thoughtful and kind. He asked her questions about the world, about what she liked, about the plants and animals she had learned to observe. Slowly, she began to share what she knew, telling him about the desert, the birds, and the small streams she had discovered. The farmer listened carefully, nodding and sometimes smiling, clearly valuing her knowledge. This simple act of recognition filled the girl with a joy she had never known. Trust, however, was not instant. There were times when she withdrew, frightened by the thought of being abandoned again. Some days, she would refuse to speak, crawling away to a quiet spot to watch him from a distance. The farmer never forced her. He would continue his work, sometimes calling out a gentle, "Take your time," or leaving small offerings of food or water nearby. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she learned that his patience was genuine. She could rely on him, not just for help, but for respect and kindness. One afternoon, a small crisis tested their growing bond. While moving a large basket of water, she lost her grip and toppled over, scraping her arms and hands badly. She froze, expecting anger or scolding. But instead, the farmer quickly came to her side, helping her sit and examining her injuries with care. "It's okay," he said softly. "We all make mistakes. You're learning, and that's what matters." In that moment, the girl felt a warmth she had never known. No one in her life had ever spoken to her like this, treating her as capable rather than broken. She realized that she was not helpless, not useless, she just needed the right support and encouragement. With the farmer's guidance, she began to regain confidence in her abilities. Small successes, watering plants correctly, lifting baskets with less effort, or even crawling farther than before, became celebrations. She was learning that she could achieve things her tribe had never thought possible. Over the weeks, their trust grew steadily. The girl started to anticipate his movements, learning his habits, and timing her actions to match his guidance. She began to feel a sense of belonging, a feeling so foreign and precious that it made her chest ache. She was no longer simply surviving. She was learning, growing, and thriving in ways she had never imagined. And all of it was because someone had chosen to see her for what she could become rather than what she lacked. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the fields, the girl sat beside the farmer. She looked at the rows of plants, the small basket of gathered herbs, and the simple wooden tools that had made life easier. She realized that she had accomplished more than she ever thought possible. Not alone, but with guidance and friendship. She looked at the farmer and smiled, a small but genuine smile. For the first time in her life, she felt safe, valued, and understood. The farmer smiled back, a quiet acknowledgement of her progress and strength. There were no grand words or ceremonies, no applause or recognition from a tribe. There was only respect, trust, and the shared understanding that she was capable, brave, and determined. And in that simple moment, the girl knew that her life was beginning to change. Life with the farmer became a rhythm the girl had never known. Each day brought new tasks, small victories, and lessons that slowly reshaped the way she saw herself. The once lonely plains that had been her only world now felt full of possibilities, filled with plants to tend, tools to master, and a kind presence that gave her courage. She was learning not only to survive, but to thrive in ways she had never imagined possible. Each morning, she would wake to the smell of fresh earth and the soft light of dawn. The farmer was always already up, moving calmly through the fields, tending to the crops. At first, she watched quietly from her spot, hesitant to speak or interrupt. But gradually, she began to follow him, crawling beside him or using the small wooden cart he had built to move herself more easily. The farmer showed her how to water the plants without spilling too much, how to dig shallow holes for seeds, and how to place them gently in the soil. At first, the tasks seemed difficult. Her arms would tire, her hands would blister, and she often felt frustrated when she could not do things perfectly. But the farmer never scolded her. He would kneel beside her, guiding her hands, showing her techniques, and then letting her try again. "Mistakes are how we learn," he would say with a quiet smile. Slowly, she began to understand that perfection was not the goal. Progress was. Each small achievement filled her with pride. She was learning that she had value and strength, not because of what she could do immediately, but because she was willing to try. Their days were long and filled with hard work, yet they were also filled with laughter and shared moments. Sometimes, the girl would tell the farmer stories of her childhood in the tribe, of the things she had seen and the lessons she had learned about the land and the animals. The farmer listened carefully, asking questions and showing interest in her knowledge. He treated her as an equal, valuing her observations and experiences. The girl began to realize that her mind, as much as her body, was powerful. She had wisdom to offer, and for the first time in her life, someone truly listened. As the weeks passed, she became more independent. She learned to use the cart to move across the uneven terrain, to carry baskets of water and harvested crops, and even to reach higher places with the help of small ramps and pulleys the farmer had built. She discovered that limitations were often only temporary barriers, waiting for clever solutions. Every new skill she mastered brought a sense of freedom. She began to feel capable and strong in ways she had never known before. Despite these successes, life was not without challenges. One afternoon, a sudden storm swept across the plains. Dark clouds rolled in, wind whipped through the fields, and rain poured down in heavy sheets. The girl was in the middle of carrying a basket of seedlings when the first drops fell. Panic gripped her, but the farmer's calm voice called her name. Using all her strength and the skills she had learned, she crawled toward the small shed where they kept tools and supplies. Her arms ached, and the rain soaked her clothes, but she did not give up. The farmer waited for her, helping her inside and covering her with blankets to warm her shivering body. "See," he said gently, "you can do hard things. You are stronger than you think." That storm became a turning point. The girl realized that she had grown in ways that would have been impossible without support, patience, and trust. She understood that strength was not just about muscles, but about courage, perseverance, and the willingness to keep moving forward even when fear tried to stop her. The storm tested her body, but it also strengthened her spirit. Over time, the girl began to take initiative. She noticed problems before the farmer did, suggesting ways to improve the irrigation or protect the plants from pests. She started making small improvements to the cart and the tools, using her imagination and problem-solving skills. The farmer watched her with quiet pride, never taking credit for her ideas, but supporting them and helping her bring them to life. She began to see herself as a capable partner in their shared work, not just a student or someone who needed help. One day, a small challenge arose that tested both her physical and mental abilities. A group of animals had entered the field at night, trampling young crops and eating the fruit she and the farmer had worked hard to grow. The girl awoke to the destruction and felt a wave of despair. It would take days of effort to restore what was lost. But she refused to give in. She told the farmer, "We can fix this. I know how." Together, they worked from dawn to dusk, replanting seeds, repairing small fences, and building barriers to prevent future damage. Through this effort, the girl discovered the power of teamwork and her own determination. She realized that challenges were not signs of weakness, but opportunities to learn and grow. The farmer praised her, saying, "You have come so far. I am proud of your courage and wisdom." Hearing those words, the girl felt a deep sense of belonging and accomplishment. For the first time in her life, she knew that she could face difficulties and succeed, not alone, but with trust and partnership. Beyond practical skills, the girl also learned emotional strength. The farmer taught her to remain calm in difficult situations, to think before acting, and to approach problems with patience. She learned to forgive herself when she made mistakes and to celebrate even the smallest victories. Slowly, her confidence grew. She began to see herself not as someone abandoned and useless, but as someone capable, intelligent, and valuable. The bond between the girl and the farmer deepened with each passing day. They shared stories, meals, and moments of quiet reflection. The girl would sometimes sit beside the farmer in the evening, watching the sun set and listening to the wind through the fields. They spoke little, but the silence was comfortable, filled with mutual respect and understanding. She realized that human connection, when built on trust and kindness, could heal wounds deeper than physical pain or loneliness. By the end of this season, the girl had transformed. She moved with skill and confidence across the land, managed tools and tasks independently, and contributed ideas to improve their work. She had learned patience, resilience, and problem-solving, and she had discovered that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. The farmer had given her more than guidance, he had given her belief in herself. And in return, she had offered dedication, intelligence, and companionship. Together, they had built a small world of productivity, trust, and mutual respect. Yet, the girl knew that life would always bring new challenges. She had learned that the plains were unpredictable, and that every day required effort, patience, and ingenuity. But now, she felt ready. She had the skills, the mindset, and the support to face whatever came next. She no longer saw herself as helpless or abandoned. She saw herself as capable, resilient, and worthy. And she knew that with continued effort and trust, she could accomplish more than she had ever dreamed. One evening, as the sky turned deep orange and purple, the girl sat beside the farmer, looking over the flourishing fields. The crops they had nurtured together swayed gently in the wind. She felt a quiet pride and gratitude. She had survived abandonment, learned to navigate the harsh world, and discovered the power of guidance, trust, and friendship. Her heart, once heavy with loneliness and fear, now held hope, courage, and the knowledge that she was not useless. The girl realized that true strength was not only about physical ability, but about the courage to face the world, the patience to learn, and the willingness to trust others. She had discovered that even in a world that had once rejected her, there was room for growth, connection, and achievement. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, she felt a sense of calm determination. She was no longer the helpless child abandoned by her tribe. She was a young woman learning to shape her own destiny, step by step, with the guidance of someone who saw her worth. By the time the next season arrived, the girl had changed in ways that even she could hardly recognize. The lonely plains that had once been filled with fear and loneliness now felt like a space where she belonged. Her arms were strong, her mind sharp, and her spirit resilient. Under the patient guidance of the farmer, she had not only learned to survive, but to thrive. Each day brought new accomplishments, each small victory building upon the last, giving her confidence that she had never felt when she was abandoned by her tribe. Word of her perseverance and abilities slowly spread beyond the farmer's land. Some villagers, curious and skeptical, began to observe from a distance. Noticing the young girl moving with surprising skill and determination, they saw her tending to the crops, lifting baskets, repairing tools, and using her hands to navigate terrain that would challenge many who had all their limbs. They were amazed at how capable she had become, realizing that the stories of her abandonment had hidden her true strength. The girl, however, was not concerned with recognition. For her, the greatest reward was the knowledge that she could rely on herself and the trust she had built with the farmer. She had discovered that life was about perseverance, creativity, and courage. Yet, when people began to see what she could do, she felt a quiet pride. For the first time, she understood that her worth was not measured by the judgment of others, but by her own actions abilities, and determination. The farmer continued to support her every step of the way. He encouraged her to take on new responsibilities, showing her how to plan the farm's work, care for animals, and anticipate challenges that might arise from weather or pests. She learned not just to follow instructions, but to think ahead, solve problems, and make decisions on her own. Each lesson strengthened her independence. She realized that being capable was about more than physical strength. It was about thinking, planning, and trusting oneself. One day, a neighbor brought word of a small competition in a nearby village, where young people and adults could showcase skills in farming, craft, and knowledge of the land. The girl hesitated at first. Could she participate? Would people laugh at her, as they had in her tribe? The farmer, seeing her doubt, gently encouraged her. "You have learned so much," he said. "It is time to show yourself, not for others, but to see what you can accomplish. You are ready." With careful preparation, the girl agreed to participate. She spent weeks practicing her skills, planting seeds efficiently, identifying plants, using tools with precision, and preparing a small demonstration of her abilities. The farmer guided her patiently, helping her refine her movements and build confidence. When the day of the event arrived, she approached it with nervous excitement. She knew that the outcome did not define her worth. Her efforts and progress already proved her strength, but she wanted to show herself what she had achieved. At the village event, people were surprised to see a girl without legs navigating the tasks with determination and skill. She moved quickly using her arms and the small cart, demonstrating her knowledge of plants, her ability to care for crops, and her understanding of tools and techniques. Spectators whispered in awe, amazed at her capability and composure. They had never imagined that someone whom they assumed to be helpless could accomplish so much. As she worked, the girl remembered the long months of struggle, the lonely nights, and the relentless effort it took to reach this point. She thought of the farmer, who had never judged her, who had patiently taught and guided her, who had believed in her when the world had abandoned her. Her heart swelled with gratitude, and for the first time, she felt the deep satisfaction of knowing she had earned recognition through courage and perseverance, not through seeking approval. By the end of the day, the girl had not only completed all the tasks successfully, but she had also earned admiration and respect. Villagers approached her, asking questions about her techniques, marveling at her creativity, and praising her determination. Some even admitted that they had underestimated her because of her disability. And now they saw clearly the power of resilience, hard work, and intelligence. The girl smiled quietly, knowing that true strength was built from patience, trust, and effort, not physical perfection. When she returned home, she shared the experience with the farmer. He listened attentively, his calm smile reflecting pride and happiness. "You did not just show them your abilities," he said. "You showed yourself what you can achieve. That is the greatest victory." The girl realized that his words were true. Recognition from others was meaningful. But the most important acknowledgement came from within, from seeing herself as capable, resilient, and worthy. In the months that followed, life continued to flourish. The girl and the farmer worked side by side, improving their farm, learning new techniques, and exploring the surrounding plains. She had become confident, independent, and inventive. She could plan the day's work, solve unexpected problems, and teach others small skills she had mastered. Each success reinforced her belief in herself, and each challenge became an opportunity to grow stronger. Over time, she even began to help others in the village. She showed younger children how to plant seeds, care for plants, and use tools safely. She taught them that limitations were not the end of possibility, but the beginning of creativity. Through her actions, she became an example of courage, resilience, and the power of determination. People who had once doubted her began to respect her not only for what she could do, but for the strength of character she displayed every day. Though the girl had been abandoned by her tribe, she had built a life filled with meaning, accomplishment, and connection. She realized that family and community could be chosen as well as given, and that kindness, guidance, and trust could transform lives. She no longer measured her value by the tribe's rejection but by her own progress, effort, and the bonds she had nurtured with the farmer and the wider community. One quiet evening, as the sun set over the plains and painted the fields with golden light, the girl sat with the farmer, reflecting on her journey. From the lonely child abandoned by her tribe, she had grown into a confident, capable young woman. She had faced fear, hardship, and isolation, and had emerged stronger, wiser, and resilient. She had discovered that even in the harshest circumstances, life could be full of purpose, learning, and connection. She looked at the farmer, her guide and friend, and realized how much he had changed her life. He had not only taught her skills, but had believed in her when no one else would. He had given her the gift of trust, patience, and encouragement. Through his guidance, she had discovered her own strength, creativity, and independence. She understood that true triumph was not simply surviving, but growing, learning, and inspiring others along the way. The girl had learned lessons she would carry forever. That hope could flourish even in the darkest circumstances, that perseverance could overcome obstacles, and that true value was measured not by physical ability, but by courage, determination, and the willingness to keep moving forward. She had discovered that kindness and belief in others could transform lives in ways unimaginable. And though her tribe had once called her useless, abandoned her, and left her to struggle alone, she had proved something far more important. She had proved to herself that her worth was not defined by their narrow view, but by her own actions, her resilience, and her heart. She had built a life of meaning, confidence, and dignity, showing that even the most difficult beginnings could lead to extraordinary outcomes. As the stars appeared in the sky, twinkling above the plains, the girl felt a quiet sense of peace. She had faced the world alone, been abandoned, and yet she had created a life of courage, accomplishment, and connection. She had learned to trust, to grow, and to believe in herself. And she knew, without any doubt, that no matter what challenges might come in the future, she was strong enough to face them. Her journey was no longer defined by rejection or limitations. It was defined by strength, determination, and the quiet triumph of someone who refused to be broken. The girl, once abandoned and alone, had become a symbol of hope, courage, and the enduring power of belief in oneself. And as she sat beside the farmer, watching the gentle movement of the fields under the moonlight, she knew that she had finally found her place in the world, not because others had given it to her, but because she had created it herself.